Wednesday, everybody. How are you doing? Hope you're having a good day today so far and having a good week. Looking forward to Christmas, I'm sure. As stressful as Christmas can be sometimes. And check it out, a midweek podcast. Didn't think I'd get to do that again, especially before the holidays, but fortunately, my nephew had a Christmas party to go to at the school, so they're out. I have time to just actually sit and record. It's very nice. Um, however, I do also have a special episode that'll be coming up on, I'll be posting that Christmas Eve um, morning, like early or late afternoon. I mean, late morning, early afternoon, probably around 10 a.m. I'll be posting that one on Christmas Eve, a Christmas episode. And then I am going to take a break and probably until after the new year, and just focus on some other things and then get back into it. And come up with some ideas and promote the podcast during that time that I'm not actually recording. So I'm trying to come up with new ideas, new things to do to build the audience bigger. And also, hopefully, I'll be getting a new microphone. So maybe they'll sound better. I don't know. Okay, so let's jump into the episode for today and read our daily promise, which says, Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth him out of them all. Psalm 34:19. Though affliction be the promise to the sons of God, and though suffering fills their path on this earth, still does the Lord promise deliverance. Still does the Lord promise comfort, and still does the Lord promise salvation. And oh, what a deliverance, what a comfort, what a salvation. For but a moment's trifling pain, what rose jewel is bought the believer. Glory eternal, love unceasing, joy unquenchable. For the merest pinprick's brother, the believer is given all. Let me read that sentence again. For the merest pinprick's bother, the believer is given all. Now rejoice, take up your heavy cross made weightless by the sustaining power of God, and follow unto the way everlasting. Okay, so I have a few stories that I want to talk about. And then I want to talk about our woke culture and how it's ruining things. Okay. And it really is ruining things. And I just want to point some things out about it. Okay. First, there was this opinion piece that I saw on CNN, and I wanted to take a moment to read it because it's it's very sad. I think it's a very sad state of things. Um, this is by Chris Siliza. Why my COVID anxiety is spiking now, all these months later. So it says, I remember the moment distinctly. It was Thanksgiving. We, my wife, kids, and mom, were at my college friend's house with his family. Everyone had the Fauci ouchie, and we had all taken tests that morning to make sure it was safe to celebrate together. That was the last day I felt relatively unworried about the virus. Looking back, I remember someone at that Thanksgiving dinner mentioning something about a new variant, but the combination of turkey, mashed potatoes, and a few mixed drinks made it easy to overlook. Since the word I'm going to say Omicron because I don't want to pronounce it exactly right and then it get flagged. Omnicore, like Steven Crowder does. Since the word omnicore entered our lexicon, every day has been filled with the varying levels of stress. Now, there's the near daily note from the boys' school about students testing positive and the measures being put in place to contain it. There's the parade of headlines that suggest that Omnicore is on the march in Europe and that a surge is inevitable in the United States. Meanwhile, there are the invites to Christmas parties and for the kids to attend sleepovers and playdates, and holiday trips, and a million and one other things that require my wife and me to play the role of public health experts, trying to weigh the proper balance between risk mitigation and outliving our lives. Here's the problem. I'm not a public health expert or anything close to it. In fact, because of a long battle, I'm not sure who is winning at this point. With health anxiety and compulsive behavior, I'm a terrible person to be tasked with making these daily calls. And yet, here we are. More than 20 months into this nightmare, more than a year after the first Fauci ouchie was administered in the United States, more than 800,000 deaths later, it seems there is no end in sight. I feel emotionally raw. Everything from anger to exhaustion to resignation sits heavier on me now than it did at that Thanksgiving dinner a few weeks ago. I'm exhausted from the constant not knowing. Each new day feels like it brings a darkening prediction of what the future holds, and I'm tired. I am a creature of habit. I love knowing what the next day will bring. With the with this pandemic, it feels like the situation is changing by the hour. And I'm resigned to the fact that none of this is going away anytime soon. The idea that the virus will be in the rearview mirror by March feels, at this point, quaint. I've watched the goalposts for the end of the virus move so many times that I can even remember where they were a month ago. And let's be clear, my life isn't a hardship. I write for a living. I've spent most of the past 20 months working from home. My family has enough to eat and access to good medical care. But for me, these past few weeks have been some of the hardest of the entire time. It felt like we were nearing an end, only to be pulled back in. Now it feels like each new month will be worse than the last. Predictions about the duration of previous waves, I've forgotten which one we are on now, have of course been spotty. While my hope is that the current projections related to Omicron are wrong, any optimism I have for the future is shaky at best. Doom and gloom is not my natural state. I usually love this is it interregnum, whatever, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. People work, yes, but not all that hard. There's plenty of Christmas cheer to go around, and I take great joy in all the best of lists that come out this time of year. Maybe that's why the latest downturn in the news on the virus has hit me so hard. This has always been one of my favorite times of year. Now it's been filled with dread and foreboding. All I know is that it's been a long December, and I need to find reasons to believe that next year is something I can look forward to. Let me tell you why this is really sad. Number one, because it doesn't sound like this person has any type of religious background, not a Christian, has no idea about having faith in things working out for the glory of God and things like that. To live in constant fear like this and have anxiety and stress over that, it's got to be miserable and exhausting. I believe that. Sad thing is when people have no faith and no hope in God, and they're not Christians, they don't have anything to look forward to, and anything that that all of the news media and the White House just telling you, be scared, be scared, be scared, lock up, it's going to be horrible, this is a terrible winter, lots of people are going to die, then of course this is how you react. That's exactly what's going to happen to you. This is why you find a lot of Christians are living free and not worrying about anything, because we trust God to take care of us. But on the other hand, if anything were to happen because we chose not to get the Fauci ouchie, or because we continue to live because we only have this one life, then we know where we're going when we die. And it's a much better prospect to be in heaven than to be on this earth right now. So we don't live in fear because we know what happens when we die. It's not the fear of the unknown, because we do know, but we also trust God that whatever He wants, it will happen. And if He wants that time for me to die to be tomorrow, then I have to be okay with that. Doesn't mean you won't be sad, or that you won't have maybe just a little bit of fear, because that's just human nature. But when you think about it, if you just pray and say, I know where I'm going when I take my last breath. There's no reason for me to fear. And then the whole point of being saved and having the Holy Spirit with you is that that is what transitions you through death. So you're not afraid because you know what happens when you die. So I feel, I pity people like this. I truly do. It's really sad. Okay. We talked about China on Monday, and I want to talk about China again. But this is because it has to do with their war on Christians. And this is an analysis piece by Ben Johnson at the Daily Wire. And we're just going to take a look and see what it says. We know that they are not very, they don't treat Christians very kindly in China. You're not allowed, as far as I know, you're not allowed to have a Bible in China. And so people have to hide them, or they, get it on the computer somehow, like one chapter at a time or something like that. It's very hard. All right. So it says, as people in the West gear up to celebrate Christmas, the people of China are bracing themselves for the Chinese Communist Party to follow through on its stated plan to intensify its war against the Christian faith. President Xi Jinping has announced that Chinese Christian churches must, quote, cultivate core socialist values, end quote, punish pastors who evangelize or worship without the government's permission, and instruct the faithful to obey the communist authorities in their own oppression. President Xi Jinping and other communist officials laid down the law at the National Religious Affairs meeting on December 4th, the first national level meeting about religion in 5 years. President Xi told religious leaders they must make deliberate, quote, efforts to keep enhancing the recognition of the motherland, the Chinese nation, the Chinese culture, the CPC or the Chinese Communist Party, and I meant the CCP, in socialism with Chinese characteristics among religious personages, is that how you say it, and believers, end quote. Religious, quote, believers should be guided to cultivate core socialist values and put them into practice, end quote. She also demanded efforts to rally vast religious believers around the Communist Party and government, the state-run Xinhua news agency reported. In other words, teachers of any of China's 5 recognized religions, which is Buddhism, is it Taoism or Taoism, Catholicism, Protestantism, and Islam, must become apostles of communism, preaching the pseudo gospel of obedience to the state. Let me uh, the way I break it down as to why China cracks down on any type of religious freedom. Number one, because they do understand that politics is downstream of religion and that they are inextricably linked, and you cannot separate them. They understand that. And they have a statewide religion, a government religion, which is the Communist Party, right? And they don't allow the free practice of any other religion, because when you do that, you give people more freedom to rise up against you, to have faith in something else, especially on Christianity. If you allow that religion, if you allow people to worship and serve God and become Christians and get saved, of course you can't stop anybody from getting saved. That'll happen no matter where you are. Good luck trying to stop it. But you can't allow them to build on that faith and be grow in being a Christian, where they can have more hope and faith. So you keep that buried down and lock them down on that, where they cannot do those kinds of things. It's a lot harder for you to grow in your faith. But I would venture to say that it's a lot easier to be converted and get saved, because you recognize what's happening and you recognize what Jesus and Christianity can offer you, regardless of the fact that you're not going to be able to practice your faith freely, and that you could be killed for it possibly. But what a great reward, getting to spend eternity in heaven with Jesus after living in a crappy, oppressed, hopeless life under Chinese rule. She wants to assure that churches know their place, or else religious belief must not interfere with educational, judicial, and administrative affairs as well as social life, he said on December 4th. This is especially true of clergy who teach on social media and the internet, something that has terrified the CCP since the last meeting in 2016. Unauthorized prayer or preaching threatened the aesthetic regime. atheistic regime. Worse yet, President Xi is calling on church leaders to do his bidding for him. To help secure his power, President Xi is instructing churches to crack down on clergy who proclaim the gospel or worship with fellow believers without the party's approval. All religious groups are required to strengthen their self management, she added. Since President Xi changed party rules to effectively make himself president for life, churches know they face obedience or Xi's wrath for many, many years to come. But the CCP is not leaving the suppression of the gospel to ecclesiastical leadership. To bring this about, she said he will send quote unquote cadres of communist agents into churches who are from the government and they're here to help. Quote, it is necessary to cultivate a team of party and government cadres who are proficient in Marxist religious views, familiar with religious work, and good at working with religious believers, and let them study Marxist religious views, the CCP's religious work theories and policies, and religious knowledge. A cadre leader must be firm in ideology and politics, adhere to Marxist religious views, and strengthens the construction of the discipline of the Marxist religious studies, reported Bitter Winter magazine, which reports on Christian persecution in China. That follows the Chinese Communist Party's resolution on history, adopted just days before Xi's virtual meeting with Joe Biden, which says that quote, religions in China provided active guidance for the adaptation of religions to socialist society, end quote. This month's meeting, which attracted few headlines in the U.S., signaled a new era of deeper persecution. The communist tone was so harsh that even propaganda media couldn't cover for them. Quote, China tightens control of religion, reported the South China Morning Post, which the New York Times has said is pioneering a new form of propaganda for Beijing. Pot, meet the kettle. Believers have had things bad enough under the 2016 guidance. Religious freedom conditions in China continue to deteriorate, according to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. The communist Chinese government has created a high-tech surveillance state utilizing facial recognition and artificial intelligence to monitor and harass Christians, Tibetan Buddhists, Falun Gong, and other religions, reported USCIRF. Independent experts estimate that between 900,000 and 1.8 million Uyghur, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and other Muslims have been detained in more than 1,300 concentration camps in Xinjiang. Yet the Chinese communists do not merely persecute believers, but insist on changing the substance of the faith itself. The meeting demands that church leaders proceed with what President Xi calls the quote-unquote uh, syncretization of religion. So I don't know how to pronounce it, but syncretization, whatever. It's the process by which non-Chinese societies come under the influence of Chinese culture. Each faith must be interpreted according to Chinese Communist ideology, and every religion must create a, quote, religious theory of socialism with Chinese characteristics, end quote. The meeting signals that this process of adulterating the faith, which is already apace, will ramp up in the years to come. For example, a Chinese textbook claims that Jesus Christ killed a woman. Wow, okay. A textbook that teaches law and ethics in Chinese secondary schools twists the traditional gospel story of the woman caught committing adultery. In the gospel, Jesus says that only someone without sin should cast the first stone at her, then tells the woman to go and sin no more. The Chinese textbook presents a twist ending. Quote, when the crowd retreated, Jesus raised a stone and killed the woman and said, I am also a sinner, but if the law can only be executed by a spotless person, then the law will die. Okay. The story, which the authorities apparently plagiarized from Orson Scott Card, teaches that the citizens should obey government officials, quote, because, honest or corrupted, they represent the party and the party's law should never be questioned, explained Bitter Winter magazine. Unfortunately, the CCP's war on religion has extended beyond classrooms, reaching into churches, seminaries, and Christians' homes. In April 2020, one of the CCP's cadres ordered impoverished Christians to remove pictures of Jesus or banners with scriptural quotations from their living rooms or lose the state pension that keeps them alive. That follows a 2017 campaign to force Chinese Christians to replace crosses, images of Jesus, or Bible verses with pictures of President Xi Jinping. Christians also had the option of replacing an image of the Prince of Peace with a picture of the greatest mass murder in history, former dictator Mao Zedong. In March 2017, a social media account reported that villagers in Jiangxi province willingly took down 624 faith-oriented images and put up 453 pictures of Xi. But villagers confirmed that government officials used force, including threatening the loss of government benefits, to effect the change. In June 2019, communist officials ordered a state-sanctioned Protestant church in Henan province to replace the Ten Commandments with socialist propaganda. Quote, "You have to do whatever the party tells you to do. If you contradict, your church will be shut down immediately," end quote, a CCP official reportedly told the congregation. One of the newly displayed quotations from Xi Jinping states that core socialist values will immerse various religions of China. Imagine having to replace the Ten Commandments with a statement that communism will drown your faith. The previous November, officials with the United Front Work Department required another Protestant church to erase the first commandment of the Decalogue, which forbids having other gods. This must be removed, one of the 30 members of the inspection team that showed up at the church said, pointing at the words etched in stone by God's finger. Those who do not comply with the government's tiniest edict face incarceration. On May 21st, communists arrested Roman Catholic Bishop Joseph Zhang Weizhu of Xinjiang, 7 priests, and an undisclosed number of seminarians. Their crime? Using an abandoned factory as a makeshift seminary without the government's permission. The Sinicization, I don't know how you say that, of Christianity is impossible because socialism is incompatible with Christianity. Marxism and the Bible envision different kingdoms, led by different rulers, established in different spiritual spheres, and operating according to radically different morality. Christianity, which teaches the inherent dignity of every human life thanks to its creation in the image of God, can never reduce anyone to a mere cog within the wheels of the state. And no religion whose golden rule prescribes the love of every soul could embrace the hatred that lies at the heart of socialism. Within the philosophical system of Marx and Lenin, and at the heart of their psychology, hatred of God is the principal driving force, more fundamental than all their political and economic pretensions. Militant atheism is not merely incidental or marginal to communist policy, it is not a side effect, but the central pivot, said Russian dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn. To achieve its diabolic ends, communism needs to control a population devoid of religious and national feeling, and this entails the destruction of faith and nationhood. In the communist view, efforts to bastardize Christianity, to turn churches into exponents and theorists of socialism, and to get the church to quell all internal dissent and disobedience is only the first step to the complete eradication of Christianity and every religion. The left is right that communism is an all or nothing war with the author of faith. It is wrong about how it will end. In the battles between now and that conflict's final consummation, we should take to heart the words of Solzhenitsyn to hold fast to truth because, quote, "one word of truth shall outweigh the whole world," end quote. We should do so all the more at Christmas time when, quote, "the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." Okay, that's from John 1, 1 through 14. I don't know which one it is, but it's verse number 1 through 14 somewhere. It's a memory verse. Yeah, so that's the thing, the controlling the religions and not allowing you to freely practice your faith, it keeps them in control of you, and especially if you're dependent on the government to feed you and clothe you and house you. That's why we should not be taking for granted the fact that God had mercy and grace upon us to allow us to be born as citizens of the greatest country the world has ever known, or if you were able to come here and become a citizen, even if you illegally crossed into the country, you should be thankful you're here because you could be in China. You could be living in a country like this where you have no recourse but to do what the government tells you to do. You don't have to do that here. You don't have to obey the government unless you're following a law. And it's not a law unless it's written, and it's got to go through a lot of steps in government to be a law. So count your blessings that God saw fit to make you an American, whether by birth or by coming here and getting naturalized. Be thankful for that. Do not take it for granted because it is probably outside of becoming a Christian, being an American citizen is the best gift that you could ever be given. At least that's how I feel. Okay, the last story I want to take a look at enraged me so much when I was reading this story. This is from the Washington Post, and it says here that DC third graders were made to reenact episodes from the Holocaust. This is by Nicole Asbury, and it says, let me get to that. Okay. It says a Watkins Elementary School staff member told third graders in a library class to reenact scenes from the Holocaust, directing them to dig their classmates' mass graves and simulate shooting the victims. And this came from an email from the principal. Now, this teacher was placed on leave on Friday. She allegedly assigned specific roles to students. She cast one student as Adolf Hitler, according to an email from Watkins Elementary School principal Scott Berkowitz to the third grader's parents. He did not name the staff member. That student is Jewish, according to the parent of a student who was asked to participate. At the end of the exercise, the child was told to pretend to commit suicide as Hitler did. You have a teacher, first of all, what shameful behavior to make your third graders reenact something like this. Third graders shouldn't even be learning about the Holocaust. That's a bit dark and deep for that age. What are you? 8? 7? 7 or 8 at the most? Very, very dark and tragic stuff to be teaching kids that young. So, shame on you for teaching those kids that. Secondly, shame on you for making them reenact something so tragic. And thirdly, I feel it was a hate-filled, probably anti-Semitic move to force a Jewish student to play Adolf Hitler. What a sick person this is. This is a psychopath. This teacher should be in prison. But she clearly is a psychopath. Or he. I don't know if it's a woman or a man. Originally, the students were in library class on Friday for a self-directed project they would present to their classmates before winter break. But the instructor had students participate in the reenactment during their allotted research time, Berkowitz wrote to parents. He said, I want to acknowledge the gravity of this poor instructional decision, as students should never be asked to act out or portray any atrocity, especially genocide, war, or murder. Now, look, I know we have like Civil War reenactments, and you probably have Revolutionary War reenactments and things like that. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't think that I would have. Maybe you could do a World War II reenactment, but not include the genocide of the Jews in that. You don't have, I mean, that's pretty tragic. You don't really need a reenactment of it. I don't have a problem with reenacting famous wars, okay, that changed the course of history. But people usually volunteer to do that, and it's usually at least teenagers to adults. But it's voluntary, and only people that see it are the people that go to watch it, because that's what they want to do. This, I'm telling you, this teacher's a psychopath. So, a different parent of a student who was a part of the reenactment said her son had to pretend to be on a train to a concentration camp, then act as if he were dying in a gas chamber. He also had to act as if he were shooting his peers, the parent said. The parent spoke on the condition of anonymity and declined to name the child. The instructor allegedly made anti Semitic comments during the reenactment. The parent said that when the children asked why the Germans did this, the staff members said it was, quote, because the Jews ruined Christmas, end quote. I told you they were probably anti-Semitic. Yeah. I mean, how clear it was that you were even doing this in the first place. The instructor asked students after the reenactment not to tell anyone about it, but they told their homeroom teacher, the parent said. So this isn't even their actual teacher. This is just somewhere that they go. Um, like when you're in elementary school, you do like art one day of the week, music one day of the week, go to the library one day of the week. So like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're doing a different class every week, and you leave your homeroom class where you do like your history and your English and all that to go to that one class out of the day for like 40 minutes or something like that, an hour. So they weren't even the actual teacher of these students. The incident was reported to DC Public Schools Comprehensive Alternative Resolution and Equity Team. The staff member is now on leave pending a school investigation. This was not an approved lesson plan, and we sincerely apologize to our students and families who were subjected to this incident. That's from a spokesperson. The entire class met with the school's mental health response team after the Friday incident, according to Berkowitz's email. Other local schools have reported incidents of bigotry in recent months. At Woodrow Wilson High School in Northwest Washington, several swastikas, the N-word, and the phrase white power were scrawled on the wall of a men's bathroom early this month, according to reporting by a student journalist at the Beacon, the school's independent newspaper. I don't know anything about that one, but that's probably just trolls, more than likely. And I think that we should know the name of this teacher. I think their name should have immediately been put out there so that everybody knows who this psychopath is, and you keep your kids far, far away from him or her. Absolutely horrible, despicable behavior for a teacher. That's why, and I'll say it again, get your kids out of public school. It's not a safe place anymore. Now we're going to talk about woke culture. This is an opinion piece from the Daily Wire called How Woke Interlopers Are Transforming Christian Higher Education. So this one's a little bit more serious, but then we're going to talk about how it ruins Hollywood, okay? So this is by Megan Basham. In March 2019, I received a text from a friend who's a faculty member at Azusa Pacific University, a conservative Christian college in a suburb of Los Angeles. She wanted to know if I had seen the Christianity Today report that our institution, founded in 1899 with the motto God First, had updated its student handbook to allow, quote, romanticized relationships, end quote, between students of the same sex. About a year later, I heard from another Azusa friend that the administration had sent out a school-wide notice to teachers asking them to make a, quote, commitment to read, watch, or listen, end quote, to resources on, quote, allyship and anti-racism, end quote. The recommendations read like an enthusiastic endorsement of critical race theory, including everything from Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility to the New York Times 1619 Project to Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist. As Rod Dreher noted at the time in the American Conservative, if this were a list at a secular university, it would be startlingly unbalanced. Azusa is hardly the only private Christian institution bowing to the prevailing winds of left-wing culture. The Baptist University, Baylor in Waco, Texas, too, has changed its policies. While the administration insists it remains committed to biblical sexual ethics in June, the Board of Regents nevertheless opened the door to officially recognize an LGBT student group. And last year, Baylor President Linda Livingstone issued a letter commending 5 tips to cultivate cultural humility and anti-racism from the school's diversity initiative chair, a woman who has argued that societal efforts to become less racist must never end. If one were setting out to create a parody of CRT propaganda, her suggestions wouldn't look much different, linking to a list of white supremacist characteristics that include individualism, logical thinking, and, for some inexplicable reason, memo writing. You know, when they say that, like, being an individual and thinking logically and writing down notes for something is white supremacy, you are literally saying, you're not saying the quiet part out loud, but you are indicating that black people shouldn't, or that they're white supremacy because black people are too ignorant to be able to do those things as well. So we shouldn't even talk about those things. I know a lot of black people, and they all have their own individual personality, and they're free thinkers. They do what they believe is right. They think for themselves. Nobody controls them. And by the way, they do take notes. They write things to themselves so they don't forget to go do something. I mean, come on, people. All right. Biola University followed suit with a new diversity initiative and a clarion call for the school to get involved in the business of racial advocacy. Not to be outdone, Billy Graham's alma mater, the Evangelical Wheaton, had a radicalized minority recognition ceremony for students of color during graduation week this past spring. It also removed a nearly 70-year-old plaque honoring one of its most famous sons, Jim Elliot, a 1950s missionary who was martyred while witnessing to an Ecuadorian tribe because the inscription described his murderers as savage. Well, they were. Well, let's just be honest. They were savages. They killed anybody that walked onto their island. So, even the Jerry Falwell founded Liberty University, widely widely viewed by progressives as the most belligerently right wing of religious higher ed, has launched a department christened with those ubiquitous corporate buzzwords that cover a multitude of agendas: equity and inclusion. It was with this background in mind that parents, students, and alumni at Grove City College became so alarmed last year when they began to see what they describe as evidence of critical race theory and LGBT activism creeping into their conservative Christian institution. It started with a petition. Outside of perhaps Hillsdale, to which it is often compared, if there was one college in the country that might have seemed immune to wokeness, it was Grove City. Actually, there is another one that is immune to wokeness. The other college that is really good is Providence Christian College. Um, and it says that they equip students to be firmly grounded in biblical biblical truth, thoroughly educated in the liberal arts, and fully engaged in their church, their community, and the world for the glory of God and for service to humanity. Now, the school is famous for refusing to accept any form of federal funding, a policy born of fierce independence that has allowed it to escape the fate of so many other religious schools that wriggle under the rainbow thumb of every shifting discrimination regulations. In fact, it was after Grove City College won a 1984 Supreme Court case regarding Title IX law that requires government funded schools to treat gender, sexual orientation, nationality, etc. as protected classes, that Hillsdale, too, decided to shake off Uncle Sam's purse strings. Even more iconoclastic, GCC declines to offer tenure to faculty, not even to revered conservative intellectuals like Reagan biographer Paul Kengor or best-selling historian Carl Truman. And yet, parent Scott Klusendorf tells me that what government pressure failed to accomplish, social pressure from within and without is quietly managing. The same tactics used to smuggle left wing ideology into other Christian institutions, he says, have recently been at work at Grove City. That's why he and a group of fellow parents, alumni, and students launched a petition in November to ask the school's administration to save GCC from CRT. Many of us first wrote to GCC President Paul Mcnulty privately about our concerns and did not get a response, shares Klusendorf. That's when we knew we were going to have to go public. Klusendorf, who is no stranger to dissecting and debating worldviews as the president of the Life Training Institute and author of The Case for Life, Equipping Christians to Engage the Culture, says he and other parents first began to feel that an issue was developing in the summer of 2020. As riots sparked by the death of George Floyd decimated cities across the country, a group of Black Lives Matter activists demanded, among other things, that GCC institute anti racist based bias trainings, create a new Office of Diversity and Inclusion, invite more Black speakers to chapel to teach about minority issues, and establish education courses that require anti racist is it, what is it? Pedagog pedagogies? Is that how you say that? I don't know. All of it was, of course, to be done under the auspices of the gospel's command to love one another. Yet, for all its references to the New Testament and the Imago Dei, I don't know, the BLM petition was led by a former student actively opposed to biblically orthodox beliefs, Eve Ettinger, who identifies as queer and goes by they them pronouns. Today hosts a podcast dedicated to deconstructing Christian fundamentalism. It's hard to imagine that Ettinger had much respect for GCC's 150-year-old ideological commitments, especially as an early draft of their letter, later amended, demanded that the college fire Ken Gora and shut down the Faith and Freedom think tank he leads. Nevertheless, their major demands were eventually met. 2 months after they issued their letter, the school, like so many others, announced the formation of a new President's Council on Diversity. Its aim, McNulty told the student newspaper, was to help him understand what obstacles may be impeding our success with regard to racial and ethnic diversity. Corporate Republicans and expanding power. What bothers Klusendorf is that while McNulty's office immediately issued a defensive response to the petition, he and his group published in November no such public refutations to the charges of racism were offered to the BLM petitioners. Instead, he speculates fear seemed to spur the college to appeasement. The thing is, once you have a diversity council, they get institutional power. They expand, one GCC professor who spoke on the condition of anonymity told me. And then, at a certain point, it becomes an issue of not wanting to admit that things got out of control. Multiple faculty members I spoke to described McNulty and some GCC board members as CEO-style Republicans. They come from the corporate and political establishment, worlds where compromise with activist movements are common. They're good people, you know. Many of them are very solidly conservative, one professor tells me. Many of them say that they're against CRT, but they fall for the repackaging and renaming of it. That makes it kind of easy to lie to yourself about what's really happening. Shortly after the launch of the Diversity Council, the school hosted a chapel talk by anti-racist scholar and Kendi protege Jamar Tisby as part of a series on racial justice. The administration had said it didn't know that Tisby had a reputation for BLM-style rhetoric, despite the fact that he had, by then, very publicly contended the New York Times that white Christians have to face the possibility that everything they have learned about their faith has been designed to explicitly or implicitly reinforce a racist structure. His chapel speech followed much the same theme. He insisted that, quote, freedom, justice, and democracy, especially for black people and other people of color, are in imminent danger. And he implicitly labeled students who refused to get involved in the struggle racist. This view was echoed to a milder degree by other chapel speakers in the series, including a bizarre panel in which the greatest incident of racial aggression as an Asian student could bring to mind was when a woman not affiliated with GCC asked her at a Chinese New Year event how to say thank you in Chinese. The co-ed breathily explains in the video that she is Korean. It made me pretty uncomfortable due to the insensitivity and carelessness of the question, she says. It was a little degrading and patronizing, like I was a child answering this for her entertainment. Evidently lost on the student was her own churlishness at reading racism into the woman's very reasonable mistake of assuming that an Asian student volunteering at a Chinese-themed event might actually be Chinese and attempt to make polite conversation with her on that basis. To be clear, these chapel ideas were not presented in the classroom context of cross-examination to test their soundness, but with the imperative of religious instruction. In a separate chapel, the school chaplain and senior director of Christian formation himself implored students in the context of racial reconciliation to be a part of the quote-unquote resistance. The fact that resistance is needed was taken as a given. Proof of this is the fact that GCC has yet to invite any critics of the idea that America and American Christianity are in the grip of unrepentant racism to share their views in the chapel setting. Other items on the BLM's petitions list were also soon checked off. In the spring of 2021, the college introduced a new class in the education department titled Cultural Diversity and Advocacy that promised to teach students multicultural awareness and how to become actively anti-racist. The course, advertised around campus with a poster showing raised fists and varying skin tones, featured only 4 texts, all from racial activists. Tanishi Coates, Between the World and Me, Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist, and David W. Swanson's Rediscipling the White Church. The issue with the course, professors critical of it told me, was not just that it represented advocacy, not scholarship. The final, described in the student paper, required students to create a community project toward racial reconciliation with the expressed hope that they would be carried out, but that it failed to adhere to the high academic and intellectual standards for which Grove City is known. These are the kind of pop text, rather than scholarly argumentative text, a faculty member told me. But if you look at Grove City's mission, it talks about examining text of enduring values. Well, a New York Times bestseller published in 2019 does not fit that bill to me. In the meantime, a host of parents began hearing from their kids and resident assistants training that the program had begun including racial struggle sessions, with the director and his wife encouraging students to admit their inner racism as well as their white guilt and privilege. Oh, God. Diversity by any other name. McNulty has said that the purpose of the Diversity Council is to assist him in determining how the college can be more successful in attracting and retaining minority students. That's an aim Professor Carl Truman, who defended the college against charges of wokeness in a recent essay at Patriot Post, can get behind. Truman, whose conservative bona fides need no burnishing, tells me he has no qualms saying that, quote, wokeness in general is destroying higher education in the United States of America, end quote. But he worries that one extreme view may be provoking another, and he believes that diversity as a goal can still be a laudable thing. A Cambridge educated Brit, Truman has had the assimilation experience himself. I'm not an American, and when I moved to America, I appreciated that the institution I was working for made some efforts to make me feel welcome, he says. I also think it's great for students to mix with people from different backgrounds. When I was at college, I met people from wealthy backgrounds, I met people from humble backgrounds, and I developed a range of friends across a variety of different experiences of the world. I actually think a diverse student body can help broaden the minds and the experiences of students if we detach it from the identity politics idea. And that might be true. But like I said on Monday, diversity is diversity for the sake of progress um, is not the way to go. Um, it's not always progress just because of diversity. I think that's how I meant to say it. The problem is, from most of the evidence, the Diversity Council's activities to date haven't been outwardly focused on recruiting a varied student body nearly as much as they've been inwardly focused on cultural change. The same problem cropping up at Christian campuses across the nation. And when Truman describes what he thinks is causing that phenomenon at other institutions, faculty members that lack commitment to the school's confessional position, bad hires by the administration, welcoming left wing lecturers whose ideas go unchallenged, he's describing exactly what the parent petitioners believes is happening at Grove City. Klusendorf says that if the Diversity Council were simply devoted to fostering a greater mix of students from different ethnic and economic backgrounds, rather than imputing systemic and generational guilt to one group, he would have no issue with its activities. If the council is simply wanting to figure out how to help minority students feel welcome on campus, you can do that without the campus embracing critical race theory like staging viewings of the documentary White People, he says. You don't have to talk about white privilege and intrinsic racism. You can, in a targeted way within a biblical worldview, help minority students feel welcome. He then points to the trajectory of diversity councils that other Christian campuses have taken in recent years, becoming more boldly engaged in progressive activism. For that reason, he believes that if a Christian college or university truly wants to establish a sanctioned body to bring about a more varied student body, it should name itself something else. Anytime you name something Diversity Council, that should set off red flags in any biblically grounded Christian, Klusendorf says, because that means something in the corporate world, and it means something in the education world. Diversity councils are not about diversity. They're about promoting a worldview that is hostile to the Christian one. And you know, people lose their jobs when they violate the Diversity Council in a corporate structure. Where he and other parent petitioners agree with Truman and the administration, however, is that reports of GCC's death to rampant wokeism have been widely exaggerated. Truman says he received a note from one parent after the anti CRT petition went live in November describing a GCC as a woke nightmare. Klusendorf admits that there have been overreactions, but contends it has never been the group's aim to convey that impression. The letter, he says, was intended to lay out the creeping wokeness they have seen so far with the goal of arresting it before it goes any further. And there are other professors on campus who took it that way. As one told me, I clearly saw the petition as them saying, hey, we see the camel's nose in the tent, and we would like the college to take actions to ensure that the rest of the camel does not enter the tent. So what's love got to do with it? Race-based activism isn't the only way that leftist ideology sneaks in the tent. However, and two different professors I spoke with said they don't want the role LGBT activism has played in bringing wokeness to GCC to go unnoticed in the midst of the CRT debate, especially as they've experienced firsthand the manipulative tactics such groups sometimes use. Both tell me that LGBT students and their allies have been pushing to transform Grove City into an affirming campus for years, choosing to enroll at the school despite knowing that its views conflict with their own. That indeed is the point. Right. So, if the views of the university is in conflict with your views, you just don't go. Go somewhere else. But that's it. They want to go and then they want to force it to change and be like them. I have a great video that you should go watch. John Doyle just posted yesterday about how Beauty and the Beast is implicitly right wing, and it's very intelligent, and I never would have looked at it that way, but he makes the same point in there about someone who wants to take control and make things their way, even when you know that that way doesn't work and it always falls apart. That's still what you want to do. It's a good point. I'll link it. The faculty members described gay activists commandeering the college Democrat student group as a front for an LGBT club to pursue an agenda of bringing in gay speakers and recruiting new LGBT members. All of it became much more open on a couple of years ago during a battle over rainbow stickers. One of the few left-leaning professors on campus, Warren Throckmorton, had placed a rainbow decal on his door, ostensibly to let LGBT students know that his office was a safe place to dialogue. A few other teachers followed suit at the request of students who were pressuring faculty to care for gay students. The best way you can care for a gay student is to let them know that it's a sin and to repent. That's the best thing you could do. The way that they had framed it was to say, hey, would you be willing to put this sticker on your door as a signal to students who might be struggling with these issues that you are someone whose door is open to dialogue? One professor tells me. And I think to many of us, that was a bit of a frustrating way to frame that because 100% of Grove City College professors are, by definition, open to dialogue with students on these questions. He points out that the undertone of the pressure was that the students were trying to identify professors willing to show them Christ-like love, but were demanding it play out through the symbolism of total acceptance. By implication, the teacher tells me, if a professor does not have this sticker on his or her door, then that professor is not someone who actually loves you if you're struggling with this particular issue, right? And so there was a little bit of like a moral guilt trip, in my view, in the way that the group who asked people to put the stickers on the door were framing this. Because to the rest of the whole planet, that's not what that sticker means, right? He points out that in the popular culture and with their philosophical proponents, LGBT capitulation and the introduction of CRT ideology often go hand in hand, as in fact it did with Eve Edinger and several of her fellow BLM activists. Quietly riding the ship. I questioned Mcnulty, who was Deputy Attorney General under the George W. Bush administration, about concerns over creeping wokeness, and true to the establishment observation of the anonymous professor, his answers were short and safely corporate. He conceded only that it is, quote, reasonable for parents to be concerned about what is happening in higher education and to seek information and clarification, end quote. But his actions may be speaking louder than his responses. Two alumni posted a message, a copy of which was shared with the Daily Wire, to a closed Facebook group saying that they had spoken with Mcnulty and were assured he was taking steps to address their concerns. He promised that more consideration would be given to future chapel topics and speakers, and admitted that text in the new education class did promote CRT. To that aim, Mcnulty told the alums that the class is being revised to add additional books and materials for balance, and that the initial process for the course's approval, as well as the poster created to promote it, are under review. Finally, the alums reported that accusations about the RA program that have already been found to have merit have been addressed, and the training materials are under review. It may not be the forthright answer the parent petitioners were looking for, but it does suggest that their actions have had an impact. So perhaps Grove City should hold lesson for the parents, teachers, students, and alumni at other Christian colleges and universities, despairing over the wokeness they see infiltrating once faithful institutions. Perhaps it takes a little activism to combat activism. Perhaps it's more productive to light a candle than curse the dark. Okay, yeah, I agree. This stuff is absolutely ruining Christian culture, but it's also ruining our the Hollywood culture. So I'm not going to read this whole article, but I just want to point out 9 movie sequels and reboots that were ruined by woke politics by Christian Toto. Okay? So first we have And Just Like That. Sex and the City made Sarah Jessica Parker a star and spawned 2 feature-length films. The second, 2010's the second, 2010 Sex and the City 2 drew so much disdain it looked like the property was down for the count. So HBO Max saw a chance to reunite the gal pals and tell stories about their lives as glamorous 50-something women. Except Kim Cattrall, who played Samantha on the series, wanted no part of a reunion. Okay, HBO saw fit to apologize for the original show's thought crimes. Too white, too much privilege. Okay, so that's what it is. Parker's character is now podcast co-host alongside a queer, non-binary partner who rants for a good 5 minutes about all things woke in the early going. Miranda also apologizes for not being woken up in an embarrassing sequence that must have been a chore for the actress Cynthia Nixon to shoot. All right, worst of all, a show once known for body humor and outrageous shtick is now serious, sober, and full of self-doubt. Great. Charlie's Angels, right? The 2019 remake reboot literally started on a woke note. Progressive actress Kristen Stewart tells a would-be lover, "I believe women can do anything." And it only got worse from there, with director Elizabeth Banks leaning harder into the film's feminism over bikinis and bofo action. Star Wars, right? So, Star Wars Saga 2019's The Rise of Skywalker earned a $515 million at the US box office, right? The Force Awakens, which is the first film in the most recent Star Wars trilogy, scored $936 million 4 years earlier. All right, now the Star Wars film series is in dry lock. So we had Disney Plus's The Mandalorian, and they fired Gina Carano. So Disney ponied up $4 billion to George Lucas in 2012 to buy the rights to all things Star Wars. Now the Mouse House can't get a new Star Wars film off the ground. The most promising title, Rogue Squadron, just got shelved, and a deal to let the Game of Thrones team create their own Star Wars trilogy never got off the ground. Borat subsequent movie film. If you don't know who Borat is, I don't know what to tell you. So Cohen concocted fresh, funny bits about his ideological foes. We'd welcome Borat back unconditionally. Instead, the film uncorks stale one-liners that made us miss the 2006 original even more. I never saw the original. The sequel doubles as a female empowerment tale as Borat's daughter, Maria Bakalova, comes of age under her daddy's bizarre tutelage. The woke messaging, capped by the film's political propaganda, delivers a 1-2 punch that flattens the sequel. Terminator Dark Fate. So it still leans heavily on woke talking points. It says this flop is a major improvement over the previous listed sequels. It boasts some terrific action sequences. Okay, all right. Which it likely played a role in its abysmal box office haul, which is $62 million. That's less than even the disappointing 2016 film Terminator Genesis, which earned $89 million. All right. So it stalls mid-movie for a painful plea for open borders. It centers around Natalia Reyes. Only the character is a dud, unable to replicate the memorable moments Hamilton and Schwarzenegger delivered in earlier installments. Mackenzie Davis is better as the half woman, half robot heroine, but the film's reliance on girl power theatrics is obvious as the film's sad marketing campaign. The first promotional shot for the sequel featured the movie's three female characters strutting toward the camera. Here's a tip: if you're pushing a Terminator project, you might want to make Schwarzenegger more than an afterthought. Coming to America. All right. What truly bogs this film down is its oppressive woke flourishes. The regal aides who bathed Prince Akeem now offer those services to Leslie Jones' character. The prince's oldest daughter wants to inherit the throne, angry that her father's bastard son gets first crack at it. So, Coming to America was Eddie Murphy. It was very, very hilarious. So, they're really ruining it here. Ghostbusters with the all-female cast. I'm not going to even go over that because you know about it. So now Doctor Who as well. So Whittaker's ill-fated reign is over now, and the showrunner behind the Doctor Who rebirth, Russell T Davies, is taking the helm once more. Let's see if he'll continue down the woke path or give passionate fans a reason to reclaim the show. So it went woke. The press, right on cue, hailed every new progressive element of the series. Audiences, however, abandoned the franchise. All right. In droves, while the series attacked men, a Donald Trump stand-in, and held a jet getting knocked up. All right. Neighbors 2, Sorority Rising. So this is from Neighbors. This was Seth Rogen. They lived next to a sorority house, and it was absolutely hilarious. Now, the team behind the franchise didn't trust the story's DNA, though. Instead, they hired a pair of female screenwriters to oversee the sequel and make sure it wasn't just funny, but empowering. What can kill comedy faster than that? Audiences, sensing the franchise took a turn for the woke, stayed mostly away. The box office shrank accordingly, with Sorority Rising earning a sad $55 million. But it did draw 150 before. So, it everything that goes woke, go broke, right? What I thought would be interesting before we go is for me to take the Are You Really Woke quiz, okay? Let's see if I'm really woke. I am not, but let's see. Question 1. How do you feel about the representation of women in video games? It's sexist and we need to see more strong independent female characters. Video games are for lazy millennials. It's a little sexist, I guess, but on the whole, I don't see a huge problem with it. Video games are for lazy millennials. Number 2, how do you feel about manspreading? It's a real problem and men need to stop doing it. People should give others space on the seats, but I don't think it should be politicized. It's complete nonsense and a non-issue. It's a non-issue. In fact, it is an issue for the men. There is a biological reason they sit like that. Number 3, do you think statues of historical American figures that were slave owners should be removed? Yes, and they should be destroyed too. Probably, but we should put them in museums rather than destroy them. Never. They are an important part of American history. Absolutely, they're important. What do you think about the gender pay gap? It's real and it needs to be addressed. I'm sure it exists, but I'm not sure it's as big of an issue as some make it out to be. Women should be at home raising children, not working anyway. Okay. Look, this is a very hard one to answer because the wage gap doesn't exist. And so I would just say that, if women want to get paid more money, they should take the jobs that men are taking. But since that's not an option, I'm going to answer that women should be staying at home raising the children. Is Colin Kaepernick justified in kneeling during the anthem? Of course, and I kneel with him. Honestly, I'm not quite sure what he's even protesting. No, he needs to respect the American anthem. Yes, he needs to respect it. By the way, let me just run back to this previous question. When I said that women should be raising their children and not working, if you don't have children, by all means, go have a job. But if you have children at home that are being raised by daycare or by the public school system, and you're not the one nurturing them and teaching them as they grow up, That's what I mean by that. I don't have a problem with women working if they don't have children. If you have an infant, a newborn, all the way up to school age, I don't think that you should be working. I think you should be at home with the children. Number 6. Should far right groups be given the right to protest? No, their hate should not be given a platform. While we might not agree with them, we should still respect their right to free speech. Of course, they're the only thing that's going to save this nation. Absolutely. We're the ones that's going to save it. Do African Americans deserve reparation payments for slavery? Of course they do. While it's a great concept, it would never work in practice. Nope. Nope, they don't. Is mansplaining an issue? Get out of here with that feminist garbage. Do you believe in white privilege? Are you kidding me? Are all white people racist? Absolutely not. All white people are not racist. Which group has the most privilege? White cisgendered men? Minorities actually have the most privilege due to affirmative action, probably the ones with the most money, regardless of race. Uh, Due to affirmative action. Is Columbus Day racist? No, it's not racist. It represents a man who did amazing things and deserves recognition. I'm probably going to have to cut this out of the YouTube video or some of the questions. Is it insensitive to dress up as other races for Halloween? The whole point of Halloween is that you can dress up as whoever you want. I don't celebrate it though. Are minorities underrepresented in Hollywood? Of course not. The role should go to the person who fits the part. Absolutely. Does history told by white historians need to be re-examined, in a sense, retold? History is facts, and you can't change facts. Should Hollywood stop casting so many women as stereotypical damsels in distress? Women are naturally weak, and depicting them in that way is just realistic. I don't know. Maybe the role should depend on the story. Do you think minorities are unfairly targeted by the police? It says, yes, it's an issue that ends in unjust killings. Yes, but I also think minorities should be respectful if prosecuted if they broke a law. No, minorities are more predisposed to being criminals, so it makes sense. Okay, well, that's none of those fit. I'm going to say yes, but I also think that they should be prosecuted if they break a law, because the reason why they're not targeted, but they come in contact with police more because there's a heavier police presence in their communities. Should women be allowed combat roles in the military? Women are weaker than men physically and have no place in the military. What do you think about the war on drugs? The war on drugs targets minorities, and all drugs should be legalized. Maybe some of the less dangerous drugs should be legalized. Anyone who gets involved in drugs deserves jail time. I just think that anybody who doesn't commit a violent crime, and it just involves drugs, maybe shouldn't be prosecuted quite as harshly as they are. So I guess we're gonna go with that one. Legalizing like marijuana. Do immigrants have a responsibility to adapt to our culture, or do we have a responsibility to change ours to make them feel at home? Um, Immigrants shouldn't even be allowed in. I mean, very few. It should be a much bigger process, a much tougher process of choosing immigrants to come. But they really shouldn't be allowed to come if they're not going to adapt. Do you believe in a world without borders? We need to enforce and strengthen our borders more now than ever. Should girls be allowed to join the Boy Scouts? No, that's what the Girl Scouts are for. What's more important, policing hate speech or promoting free speech? Hate speech is an exception to freedom of speech and should be punished. Hate speech is wrong, but censorship is also wrong. Our freedom of speech should never be infringed upon, no matter what we say. I'm going to say that hateful speech is wrong, but censorship is also wrong. Should a woman be able to breastfeed in public? Of course not. That is something that you do at home or in private. What kinds of weapons should people be able to own? Guns of pretty much all types. Should a minority applicant to a university be given a spot over a white student with better grades? The student with the better grades earned their spot and should get it. See your results. Traditionalist. You're a conservative individual with very traditional ideas about the world. People accuse you of some pretty awful things, but to you, it's just how you were raised. I'm going to leave the episode here. Hope you had a good time with me today. Hope you enjoyed the quiz. Maybe you should go check it out at thequiz.com. Also, please go to Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple. Subscribe to the show. Leave me a review. Head on over to YouTube. You can go and watch all of my videos. I have quite a lot of content. Like and share the videos. Leave me a comment. I'll get back to you. But the best thing that you can do for me, which would be a most awesome Christmas present, go subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when I upload new videos. I apologize if this episode went quite long, but it's just because I miss making podcasts and I was having so much fun. Anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Stay tuned Christmas Eve for a Christmas episode. God bless.